Island.
Madam President, I would request unanimous consent to dispense with the calling of the quorum.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I rise today, as I have many times for nearly 2 decades, to shed light on the long struggle of Liberian refugees in the United States, and to make the case for this administration to extend deferred enforced departure, or DED, for this population before they face potential separation from their jobs and families and deportation when their current DED designation expires on March 31st. I also call on my colleagues to take up and pass the Liberian Refugee Immigration Fairness Act, which I have offered in some form for as long as I have served in this body, to end nearly 30 years of uncertainty by finally giving these Liberians the opportunity to apply for permanent residency and a pathway to citizenship. I would also like to take a moment to express my gratitude for those advocates who have stood with me as I worked for a solution for Liberians in America, including my Rhode Island colleague, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, as well as our colleagues from Minnesota, Senators Klobuchar and Smith. The case of these Liberians is a tragic and historically unique situation. In 1989, a 7-year civil war broke out in Liberia that would claim the lives of over 200,000 people and displace more than half of the Liberian population. This conflict devastated Liberia, halting food production, collapsing the nation's economy, and destroying its infrastructure. By 1991, an estimated 14,000 Liberians fled to the United States seeking refuge from the conflict, and in March of that year, the Attorney General granted them the opportunity to register for Temporary Protective Status, or TPS. Every subsequent administration has renewed TPS for Liberians each year until the end of the first Civil War. But the prospects for a safe return ended when Liberia plunged into a second civil war from 1999 to 2003. This horrific conflict ended with the departure from power of former President Charles Taylor, who is currently serving a 50-year prison sentence by the Special Court of Sierra Leone for war crimes. In 2014, Liberia's still poverty-stricken and recovering infrastructure faced the challenge of responding to the Ebola virus outbreak in West Africa. Liberia had fewer than 200 licensed doctors to contend with the outbreak among the country's population of over 4 million people. Throughout this succession of conflict and tragedy, Liberians who sought refuge in the United States have had the option to remain here lawfully under TPS or DED, while conditions remain unstable in Liberia. But this is not amnesty. In order to participate, these Liberians are required to pass periodic background investigations, pay hundreds of dollars in fees, and stay out of trouble with the law. Many of these Liberians who have been through this process for decades are perhaps among the most vetted and rigorously examined individuals in the United States today. They have also received work authorizations, enabling them to work and start businesses, pay taxes, and raise families. Many have fully grown American citizen children who attend American schools and serve in our military. At the same time, they have not been afforded earned benefits available to American citizens. So they were responsible for their taxes, they were responsible to conduct themselves as law-abiding citizens, but they are not building up any type of Social Security benefits or any other benefits that other American workers are. In the years since 1989, they have become our neighbors, our friends, and an important community that contributes a great deal to the diversity and prosperity of states like Rhode Island. Today, Liberia has only just completed its first democratic transfer of power in decades, and there are still serious concerns about the nation's ability to maintain peace and deliver essential services to its population. If the Trump administration fails to extend the DED deadline for Liberians, hundreds of Liberian American families could be separated and uprooted from their jobs and homes and forced to return to a country that is unrecognizable to them. Moreover, it is at best unclear how Liberia's recovery could be affected by a sudden and unexpected influx of newcomers from the United States. This is why each time Congress has taken up comprehensive immigration reform and more recently discussed these issues in the context of the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA program, I work to ensure that any adjustment of status provision includes relief to Liberians who have become Americans in every way except on paper. Congress continues to debate the best path forward for DREAMers, TPS recipients, and comprehensive immigration reform, but Liberians cannot wait another month or another year. They have just over 2 weeks before their time is up. At the very least, the Trump administration should extend DED for this population for 3 additional years while Congress debates the path forward on comprehensive immigration reform. In my year, with each year that has passed since the first of these Liberians arrived, the case has grown stronger that they should have the option to adjust their status and remain in the communities where they have made their homes and raised their families. We have long since reached the point where simple justice requires that Congress extend this option to these Liberians. Congress has, on several occasions, granted temporary residents the opportunity to apply for permanent residency when their stays in the United States were prolonged by dangerous conditions in their home countries. In 1988, Congress passed a law offering permanent residency to temporary residents from Poland, Uganda, Afghanistan, and Ethiopia. Following the events in Tiananmen Square in China, Congress permitted over 52,000 Chinese nationals to apply for permanent residency. The Nicaraguan Adjustment and Central American Relief Act, or Nicara, permitted the same for 259,000 nationals of Nicaraguan, Cuba, El Salvador, and Guatemala. The Syrian Adjustment Act permitted 2,000 Syrian Jews to obtain permanent residency. The list goes on. But the fact of the matter is that there is ample precedent for providing relief for this relatively small Liberian population. Like past Congresses, this Congress must acknowledge the simple fact that the United States is now home to these law-abiding, tax-paying Liberians. To ignore them or to stay otherwise not only threatens to break up American families, but also to turn away a group whose story is quintessentially American. They fled violence and disease to come here. They worked hard and raised families. They followed our laws and subjected themselves to rigorous screening and vetting. They deserve the opportunity to make their own decision on whether to stay here or return to Liberia. I can say with confidence that Rhode Island would feel their absence if this Liberian community were forced to leave after contributing to our communities for so long, and our country would be poorer for their loss. There are many examples I could discuss of how the Liberian community in Rhode Island has enriched our state, but I will name two individuals. Lance Corporal Abraham Tarwo of the United States Marines and Providence Police Sergeant Maxwell Dorley. Both came to Rhode Island from Liberia to start their own chapters of the American dream. They both led exemplary lives and endeavored to give back to their newfound homes through public service in the form of military service and a member of our local police force in Providence. Both of them served with distinction, and our state tragically lost both of them in the line of duty in 2012. They are emblematic of the extraordinary contributions that Liberians have made to my state, and no discussion of what Liberians have meant to us is complete without mentioning both these gentlemen by name. I strongly urge President Trump to do the right thing and extend DED for Liberians living legally in the United States. I also urge my colleagues to take up and pass the Liberian Refugee Immigration Fairness Act and put an end to uncertainty for this population after decades of disappointment. And with that, Madam President, I would yield the floor. And also note the absence of quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.